They arrived on Deck 9 with nothing but their smiles. Caleb wore the standard Earth diplomatic uniform, tailored navy, a little too crisp, like he'd pressed it himself that morning with some devotion and a playlist of jazz. Mira, on the other hand, had a ponytail high enough to defy physics, and a mug of steaming cocoa that smelled entirely out of place inside the sterile gray walls of the Empire's high tribunal fortress. A guard stepped forward to confiscate it, but she simply smiled and sipped, unmoved. The guard backed away. "Is this the interrogation room?" she asked sweetly. "Or do you hold your mandatory torture in the garden nowadays?" No one answered. The Empire didn't do answers. Caleb glanced around the hall, like a tourist, unsure if they were in the right museum wing. Bit sparse in decor, don't you think? You'd think the conquering species of 17 sectors would invest in a few throw pillows. The tall creature in front of them, Command Overseer Clorvac of the Slith Dominion, curled its claws with distaste. "Humans." "Yes," Mira chirped. "Two of your finest." A second guard snarled, a low hiss that reverberated through the hall. Caleb blinked. "Oh, you're hissing. Sorry, on Earth, that usually means you're trying to open a soda bottle." Overseer Clorvac motioned, and two steel-bonded shackles dropped from the ceiling. "By decree of the Galactic Conclave, and with permission from the Subjugation Act of Year 9, you are hereby imprisoned for willful espionage and psychological warfare against Empire forces." Caleb's brow arched. "Psychological warfare? I told you the cookies were homemade. Maybe a little heavy on the nutmeg, but hardly a war crime. You uploaded a virus to our tactical servers disguised as a recipe file." "Well," Mira said, nudging Caleb, "they did ask for a taste of Earth." The chains clicked into place with a mechanical finality. Their wrists were bound. The cuffs glowed blue, neural inhibitors, likely, but neither of them struggled. "We came in peace," Caleb said, in the tone of someone commenting on a slightly overcooked omelet. "You invited us. We RSVP'd, even brought snacks." "You came to map our weaknesses," Clorvac hissed. "Didn't need to," Mira murmured. "You broadcast them every time you hold a press conference." Guards flinched. Clorvac's eyes narrowed. "You two understand what's coming, yes?" the Overseer said, voice low. "You will be tortured. You will die. Earth will receive your bodies as a warning." Caleb tilted his head. "Is this the standard Empire hospitality package? Because I specifically requested the spa upgrade." Mira sighed. "Caleb, I told you, never book through third-party galactic travel sites." They were marched down a corridor that looked like it had been designed by someone deeply allergic to color. Their cell door hissed open, a perfect cube of silence and shadow, with one blinking red sensor in the corner. "Privacy cam," Caleb noted, gesturing with his chin. "Bet it also listens. Hello, Empire. Hope you're enjoying our visit." No answer, of course. There never was. Inside the cell, Mira sat cross-legged on the floor. Caleb stood, leaning casually against the wall, testing the limits of the inhibitors with slow wrist rotations. "You think they'll go with electrocution first?" Mira asked. "No. I saw a tank of leeches labeled pre-warmed." Mira grimaced. "Oh, I hate it when the torture's thematic." The first 2 hours were mild. Painless scans. Neural probes. One small bot tried to drill into Caleb's skull, but broke its own bit. The Empire called this preliminary discomfort calibration. It escalated. Overseer Clorvac returned personally. The humans were strapped to upright frames, while energy fields pulsed across their nerves. The Overseer watched every grimace, every flicker of movement, but got no screams. Just the occasional comment. "Is this dialed to massage or mildly annoying?" Caleb asked as a current sizzled across his shoulders. "Let's just say this won't make Yelp," Mira added. Eventually, Clorvac stepped closer, his reptilian features unreadable. "What are you?" Caleb looked up at him, expression steady. "We're human." "You don't feel pain?" "Oh, we do," Mira replied. "We're just trained to ignore it until the job's done. Comes standard in our model." Clorvac's claws twitched. "You will die for your insolence." "You mistake politeness for weakness," Caleb said, tone dropping for the first time to something steely. "Big mistake. But Korvac didn't flinch. Not yet. The public execution was scheduled after sunrise. The audience was smaller than expected, just a few dozen commanders, some high-level scientists, and one nervous alien janitor named Brillick who kept glancing toward the exits. The Empire expected Earth to tune in, to see their best and brightest humiliated, executed, forgotten. Caleb and Mira stood calmly in the death chamber, still smiling. Last words? Korvac asked. Mira looked at Caleb. He shrugged. Just remember, you started this. We're just the first wave. The pulse blades came down. 2 neat slashes. 2 bodies crumpled to the floor. Silence. Korvac stood there triumphant, arms raised. They are dead, he declared. Let Earth know, we are the Empire. And this is our mercy. The footage was broadcast across a dozen systems. Earth's diplomatic channels went dark. The Empire expected fear, chaos, and surrender. They got silence. Brillick was the first to notice the oddity. He'd been assigned cleanup, a grim, thankless task. As he stepped into the morgue chamber, the 2 human bodies lay on metal slabs, still, pale, very much dead. Or so they were supposed to be. He turned away for just a second to grab the incineration codes. When he turned back, Caleb was sitting up. Oh, he said, stretching. That nap did nothing for my back. Brillick dropped his toolkit and screamed. Mira sat up next. She blinked slowly, then yawned. Did we miss dessert? A medical droid spun in frantic circles, flashing alerts. Vital signs detected. Life function stabilized. Error. Conflicting death certificate. Down the hallway, red alarms began to flash. Korvac was summoned mid-toast. His celebration halted as he stared at the screen in disbelief. That's impossible, he hissed. Caleb looked directly into the camera. Miss us. The panic spread faster than fire in a dry forest. Reports flew in. The morgue was sealed. The humans were alive. Empire scientists suggested shapeshifters, clones, temporal echoes, anything but the simplest answer. They hadn't died. Or rather, they had planned for death. Nanodampeners, pulse deflection implants, brain sync backups that rerouted neural death indicators through a faked cascade failure. It was science far beyond what the Empire thought humans capable of. But there it was, walking, talking, smiling. Mira dusted off her sleeves as they walked out of the morgue like they were checking out a hotel. Caleb turned to a camera drone floating nearby. Hi, Korvac. You really should have read the fine print on our surrender forms. Back in the war room, the overseer threw a data tablet across the chamber. Find them, he roared. Kill them again. But they were already gone. By the time the Empire realized the humans had accessed 17 restricted corridors, 5 command terminals, and the primary fleet relay systems, it was too late. They'd walked in, been tortured, died, and now they were loose. Unkillable, unfazed, unfinished. And somewhere in the bowels of the Empire's most secure fortress, a small device blinked online. A signal pulsed into space, silent and sharp. Earth received it instantly and smiled. The janitor, Brillick, hadn't stopped shaking since the human woman asked him if he had any spare cocoa. Her voice was far too chipper for someone who'd just been legally and biologically declared dead. He dropped his sanitizing pad and stumbled backward into a tray of embalming tools, which clattered loudly to the floor. Don't worry, Mira said, slipping off the morgue slab with all the grace of someone climbing out of a warm bath. We're not here to haunt you, unless you call that coffee machine in the hallway an act of war. Seriously, do you even filter? Brillick shrieked, threw his entire mop cart at them, and ran. Caleb looked at the mess, then at Mira. I guess we're awake now. Mira stretched, cracking her knuckles. Either that, or this is the weirdest afterlife ever. No harps, no wings, just the smell of antiseptic and panic. Caleb stepped over the mop. Let's get started. Their walk through the fortress should have been impossible. 43 checkpoints, retina locks, quantum ID barriers, patrolling drone units, and 4 separate kill zones with live autocannons. But every single system they passed stuttered, blinked once, then silently opened its doors. as if the very walls had reconsidered who was in charge. Caleb leaned toward a biometric scanner as it scanned him and beeped affirmatively. You'd think the Empire would update their firmware. Honestly, this is getting embarrassing. Mira smirked. We warned them about that cookie file. The fortress was chaos behind them, alarms blaring, emergency meetings in motion, hysterical speculation on broadcast comms. Someone suggested necromancy. Another proposed a secret twin program. One terrified researcher floated the theory of recursive consciousness loops, only to be laughed out of the room. But none of them had the courage to suggest the truth. The humans had planned everything. Caleb accessed the personnel manifest from a wall terminal with 2 quick taps. Looks like Overseer Clorvac is in the main council chamber, trying to convince the war board he didn't just get outmaneuvered by 2 people and a thermos of cocoa. Mira nodded thoughtfully. Do you think he's crying yet? Or still somewhere between denial and nervous twitching? Caleb chuckled. Give him time. We've got 30 minutes before the next fleet sync cycle. Let's crash their diagnostics. They moved like ghosts through the corridors, unseen, unchallenged, unsettling. Guards who spotted them froze. Some fell to their knees. One tried to shoot and missed entirely before throwing down his weapon and sprinting away, muttering prayers to a god that didn't accept long-distance calls from cowards. Mira paused at a sealed security door and pulled a hairpin from her pocket. With a casual twist, she inserted it into the panel's data node and watched it short-circuit in 3 seconds. Who needs blasters when you have bobby pins and basic mechanical knowledge? She muttered. Behind the door was the Empire's Tactical War Core, a central chamber where battle maps hovered in real time, where Admiralty conferred and planned galaxy-wide strikes. 2 high-ranking commandants were inside, mid-briefing, eyes glued to the hollow display of Earth's orbit. They didn't notice the humans until Caleb cleared his throat. Gentlemen, he said cheerfully, mind if we have a word? The taller alien whirled, drawing his sidearm, but Mira was already beside him, plucking the weapon from his grasp with a click of her tongue. Really? You point that thing at me? How rude. The shorter commandant pressed an emergency alarm. Nothing happened. Caleb held up a small, round black device and jiggled it with a grin. We jammed that 10 minutes ago. Very useful piece of tech. Yours, actually. We just borrowed it, tweaked the code, and made it better. The commandants backed up against the wall. Mira stepped in front of the holomap and tapped a few buttons. All tactical lines went dark. Every planned movement, every active patrol vanished from the network. I hope no one was counting on these to remember where their warships were, she said lightly. They're all going to feel very lost. Caleb gestured at the map. You people rely too much on tech you don't understand. You build flashy systems, but the architecture underneath is practically begging to be cracked open by someone with a library card and a caffeine addiction. The taller commandant was sweating now, scales glistening. Why are you doing this? We died, Mira replied, eyes darkening. And nobody sent flowers. A squad of guards arrived then, 12 in full exo-armor, weapons locked and targeting systems hot. They flooded into the room like a wave, aiming directly at the couple. Caleb raised both hands. Gentlemen, he said calmly, I'd suggest not firing. The lead guard didn't hesitate. He fired a single blast from his particle rifle. The bolt struck Caleb in the chest and fizzled. A soft electric pop followed by smoke, and Caleb blinked down at his shirt. Well, that's going to leave a mark. Good thing it didn't leave a hole. Mira stepped forward and tapped the side of her neck. A thin mesh shimmered into view across her body. Nanoweave shield mesh. Adaptive cloaking, kinetic dampeners, and a smart subdermal weave that reroutes energy blasts into nowhere really. It's extremely unhelpful to your whole kill the humans again plan. The guards didn't fire again. They dropped their weapons and stepped back, wide-eyed and unsure if they were hallucinating. You tortured us, Caleb said, stepping forward. You made us examples. What you didn't realize is that humans don't mind pain. We don't fear death. We analyze it, reverse engineer it, and when we come back better. Mira turned to the commandants. You made a very simple mistake. You underestimated our smiles. The entire tactical chamber darkened. Every screen turned to static. Then a single image appeared across all displays, Earth's flag, glitching gently, overlaid with a calm, automated voice. Subversion complete. Empire Tactical Systems, offline. Please consult your local administrator for a map of failure. The voice had Caleb's cheerful cadence. Mira had recorded it. Across the Empire's networks, fleets went dark. Long-range scanners collapsed. War coordination dissolved into chaos. Far above the planet, Earth's observation fleet sat in silence. No weapons drawn. No moves made. Just watching, observing, waiting. The Empire's top intelligence minds couldn't decide which was worse, that the humans were alive, or that they weren't even retaliating. Just letting the Empire unravel itself. Overseer Clorvac stood in the Central Council chamber with his fists clenched, watching the latest reports scroll past. Core network compromised. Sector 12 fleet lost contact. Tactical command has gone silent. And then the final message. Subjects 001 and 002 seen walking into Armory Hall. No resistance encountered. They're not soldiers, he muttered. They're phantoms. In the armory, Caleb admired the rows of Empire weapons. You know, he said to Mira, for all their obsession with power, these people never designed anything ergonomic. Everything's got spikes and hums too loudly. It's like they built weapons for intimidation instead of use. Mira nodded, eyeing a particularly sharp-edged rifle. The Empire is a theater production. Lots of sound and fury, signifying very little. They selected two small devices, not weapons, but signal amplifiers. Miniature jump beacons, designed for quick fleet recalls. Caleb adjusted the frequency. We're not calling anyone in, are we? Mira asked. No, he said. We're just going to ping the fleet with an anonymous ID. Let the Empire think reinforcements are coming. Then they'll really panic. Nice, she grinned. Before they left, Mira placed a single handwritten note on the table in the armory. Next time, maybe ask us politely. Earth. As they walked back into the fortress halls, things had changed. Doors opened wider. Lights flickered in sync. The very infrastructure seemed to acknowledge them now, not as enemies, but as inevitabilities. They passed a young communications officer, who froze at the sight of them and dropped his tablet. Caleb caught it mid-air, handed it back. You dropped this, he said. The officer didn't speak, just turned and ran the other direction, shrieking. By the time the couple reached the Empire's broadcast center, the room was already abandoned. Everyone had either fled or hidden. Mira sat at the main console, cross-legged, humming a Terran lullaby as she keyed in the override codes. Let's say hello to the galaxy, shall we? She said. Caleb nodded. The cameras went live. Across Empire-controlled space, screens lit up. The human couple appeared, not in combat gear, not in armor, just dressed as they always had been. Caleb's shirt was singed. Myra's ponytail was still slightly off-center. Hello, Mira said warmly. You may have heard that we died earlier. That part's true. But death for us is more of a delay, Caleb continued. A learning opportunity, something we practice overcoming. They leaned closer to the camera. You tortured us, Caleb said. And we smiled. You killed us. And we got up. You assumed we came here alone, Mira said. We didn't. Earth is always listening, always planning. We're not invaders, Caleb said. We're validators. We assess whether a species is safe to coexist with. There was a pause. And congratulations, Mira added, her voice now razor-sharp. You failed. The feed cut. In the silent aftermath, the Empire's communication lines collapsed. Commanders argued. Strategists wept. The Emperor demanded answers no one could give. Panic rippled from system to system like shock waves after a star's collapse. Back in the corridor, the couple walked together toward the hangar. Caleb checked his wrist. 10 minutes before the final signal goes out. Mira smiled. Should we leave them a parting gift? I thought you'd never ask. As they stepped into the launch bay, the screens overhead flickered to life one final time. Message, incoming activation from Earth. Classification. Final protocol. In the deepest core of the Empire's network, a buried code executed. The Empire, for all its pride, had one flaw. It never considered the possibility that the prey might be smarter than the predator. It was about to learn. And the humans hadn't even gotten started. Chlorvac hadn't slept. Not that his species required sleep in the traditional sense, but the strain had wrung something primal from him. Something wild-eyed, twitchy, and barely functional. His claws drummed on the council table, as if rhythm might somehow beat a plan out of the cold metal. Across the war room, 20 commanders argued in half a dozen languages. Most of them blamed each other. A few blamed the humans. One blamed a curse left behind by the extinct Bellari witches. No one could agree on what had happened, only that it had shattered their command chain faster than any war in their empire's long history. The humans are ghosts, one admiral spat. Phantoms with faces. They're alive, Chlorvac said sharply. We killed them. I saw it. The entire quadrant saw it. Then they came back. And now nothing works. The central holomap still refused to boot. Tactical feeds remained scrambled. Internal security logs were corrupted. The ships in orbit Group Delta had received conflicting commands and were currently drifting toward each other at speeds that promised a particularly expensive catastrophe. They're not warriors, a junior analyst stammered. They haven't fired a single shot. Which is why it's worse, Chlorvac muttered. They didn't come to fight. They came to dismantle. He turned his gaze toward the central feed, the last known location of the humans flashing red. Hangar access, Sector 8. The Empire had flooded the area with troops and drones, but they'd found nothing. No trace. Not even a dropped hair. Because the humans had stopped being hunted, and had started hunting. Somewhere beneath the surface of the fortress, Caleb stood in a climate control shaft, arms crossed, back pressed to the wall, as vents hissed around him. Mira crouched beside the main control valve, fingers working with precision across the exposed circuitry. They're panicking, Caleb said. You can feel it in the walls. I can hear it in their water pressure, Mira replied. They're rerouting too much to secondary systems, trying to bypass the mainframe lockdown. That's going to cause a sharp hiss. The pipe groaned. Exactly that, she finished. Caleb allowed himself a small smile. Chlorvac hasn't figured it out yet. He still thinks this is an isolated incident. That if he cuts the right wire or finds the right backdoor, we'll just vanish. Oh, we will vanish, Mira said. But not before he learns how humans say goodbye. She twisted the final valve. Somewhere far above them, the fortress lights flickered, then dimmed. Every corridor plunged into emergency red. Backup systems stuttered as if choking on their own code. Caleb tapped his wrist display. That gives us about 15 minutes before the fallback grid reboots. More than enough, Mira said, hopping down from the access panel. Ready to pay a visit to the vault? They moved quickly now, slipping through dark corridors, using chaos as cover. Not a single being challenged them, because no one could. The Empire had never trained its people for this kind of assault. There was no manual for quiet grins and polite sabotage. As they reached the vault doors, Caleb paused. Do you think they've figured out the message yet? Mira tilted her head. Which one? That we never stop smiling. She keyed the override panel. It blinked twice, scanned them both, and opened without resistance. Inside, the vault of protocols gleamed with forgotten data crystals and sealed orders, deep Empire contingency plans, most never meant to be read, let alone used. Find it, Caleb said. Mira moved like she already knew exactly where to look. Back in the command center, Chlorvac received the newest report with a growl. They're in the vault? No. They were in the vault, the analyst corrected. 10 minutes ago. Long gone now. How are they bypassing a lockdown? They aren't, the analyst whispered. It's the systems are unlocking for them. Chlorvac froze. That's impossible. The analyst didn't respond. Because deep down, they both knew it wasn't. The fortress hadn't been breached. It had been reprogrammed. The humans weren't intruders. They were administrators. In the secondary chamber beneath the vault, Mira loaded a data crystal into a portable reader. The small screen flickered to life, revealing a series of redacted lines and emergency codes. Caleb leaned over her shoulder. They kept these protocols off the main system, hidden even from their own command. Which means they were scared, Mira said, of someone or something. She decrypted the final line. Caleb read it aloud. Earth, do not engage. Do not provoke. If contact is made, default to diplomacy. Do not initiate aggression. Mira whistled. They knew. They just forgot, Caleb said. Or they thought time dulled our edges. She copied the file, secured it inside the reader, and tucked it away. Let's go remind them. By the time they reached the upper spire, the Empire's communications grid was coughing its last breath. Outgoing signals were rerouted. Internal surveillance was rerunning a 5-minute loop of empty corridors. Caleb and Mira stood in the central broadcast tower with the Empire's crown jewel of propaganda tech at their fingertips. Caleb scanned the system. We can broadcast to every fleet, every ship, every outpost. Real time. Mira adjusted the settings. Let's make it brief. She stepped into frame, light falling perfectly across her face. Greetings, Galactic Empire, she said, voice smooth, composed, utterly calm. We're the humans you tortured earlier. We're fine, thank you for asking. Caleb stepped beside her. This isn't a threat. This is a courtesy. You see, your empire runs on fear, on firepower, on spectacle. But humans don't respond to spectacle, Caleb said. We respond to curiosity, to mistakes, to challenges. Mira leaned closer. You challenged us. Caleb smiled. And we accepted. The broadcast ended. The silence that followed was immense. Then the real messages began. Empire stations, unmoored from command, began receiving strange pings. Not attacks, not code, just questions, queries, requests for clarification. Internal servers began pulling encrypted files no one remembered uploading. Automated systems executed self-audits. Fleet AIs flagged inconsistencies. Ships drifted to standby. Entire sectors paused. The Empire didn't collapse. It hesitated. And that was worse. Because hesitation was a wedge. A crack in the armor. Caleb and Mira walked through the heart of the command dome as klaxons blared uselessly, and lights strobed in futile protest. I don't think they've realized it yet, Mira said, adjusting her coat. Caleb nodded. That this isn't the beginning of the attack. It's the end of the test. They stopped before the Emperor's chamber doors. Do we knock? Caleb asked. Mira smirked. Would be rude not to. Inside, the Emperor stood surrounded by his remaining counselors, all pale, silent, uncertain. He turned slowly as the doors opened and the humans entered. You, he breathed. You were executed. And then we got up, Caleb replied. No army. No warships. No ultimatum. We didn't need them, Mira said. The Emperor studied them with something approaching reverence. Or horror. What are you? He whispered. Caleb tilted his head. Human. Mira took a slow step forward. We believe in kindness. In curiosity. In understanding, she said. Caleb stepped beside her. But if you touch what's ours, if you violate what we love, we turn polite into lethal. The Emperor sank into his throne. What do you want? Mira pulled the data crystal from her coat and placed it on the floor. It glowed faintly. To remind you of the rules you wrote, she said. You knew what we were. You just hoped we'd forgotten. Caleb turned toward the chamber door. You attacked 2 humans, he said, but the galaxy will remember that you woke the species behind them. The Emperor reached for the crystal. It burned cold in his hand. Mira looked back one final time. Sleep with one eye open. Earth is watching. They left in silence. And as the doors sealed shut behind them, the Empire finally understood. The humans hadn't come to start a war. They'd come to prove they didn't have to. Chlorvax stood in silence, the data crystal clutched tightly in his trembling hand. The information etched into it was older than the Empire itself. Buried contingency orders from a time when the galaxy still whispered Earth's name with awe and dread. Now, that whisper had become a scream. The room around him was still, yet heavy, like a great pressure was building behind the silence, waiting to collapse the entire chamber in a single breath. Across from him, the Emperor sat still, eyes locked on the last flickers of the broadcast. The humans hadn't attacked, and that terrified him more than orbital bombardment ever could. No violence, no declarations of war. Just two polite, relentless Terrans who had walked into the Empire's most secure fortress, smiled through their own execution, and returned from the grave to tear down the entire power structure with calm observations and sarcastic quips. The doors had closed behind them 20 minutes ago. They hadn't returned. They didn't need to. Mira and Caleb walked calmly through the outer corridors of the hangar, not in a rush, not hiding. The Empire was no longer chasing them. It was paralyzed, wrapped in the silk threads of its own assumptions. And the humans had become something far worse than prisoners. They were anomalies, outliers, apex threats in formalware. Mira exhaled deeply as they entered the final shuttle bay. How long before the fleets break free of the hold? 20 minutes, maybe less, Caleb replied. They'll reroute their systems eventually. And once they do, they'll try to play tough again. Mira grinned. That'll be cute. A single light shuttle sat waiting, unlocked, fueled, its systems already humming. They hadn't prepped it. They hadn't needed to. Somewhere along the line, the Empire had stopped recognizing them as enemies and started reacting like something ancient and misunderstood had just walked out of myth and into their command center. Caleb ran a systems check as Mira stared up at the vast sky beyond the bay's open doors. They're going to tell stories about this, she murmured. About us. Caleb looked up. Good. Let them. Because the stories will do more damage than any weapon. She nodded. We taught them fear. But not the kind they're used to. No, he said. We taught them the fear of the unknown. Outside the hangar, a cluster of low-ranking officers watched from a distance. Not one of them raised a weapon. One even nodded slightly as the humans passed. It wasn't submission. It wasn't respect. It was something older. A quiet recognition between predator and predator. As they entered the shuttle, Mira strapped in and leaned back. I almost feel bad for them. Caleb gave her a look. Almost, she clarified. The shuttle lifted off without resistance. The fortress control towers offered no challenge. No scans. No demands for identification. The launch path cleared automatically. Systems bowing before them like a throne had just passed through a village. As they left the gravity well, 100 ships hung motionless in the upper atmosphere. Imperial vessels, flagships, dreadnoughts, carriers, all frozen in formation. Some were stuck by corrupted commands. Others had simply refused to act. The humans had done the one thing no fleet was prepared for. They'd made them uncertain. Caleb patched into Earth's relay. Command, this is Outreach Team 3-9. Operation Resolve has concluded. The line crackled. Then a calm voice responded. Status. Alive. Intact. Protocol seed has been planted. Recommend observation status be changed to Tier Red. A pause. Then, confirmed. Return to base. Caleb cut the link. Mira turned to him, her voice low. You think the rest of the council will believe it? They'll have to, he said. The Empire won't recover from this fast. And if they do, well, we've already taught them how fragile they really are. Behind them, the Empire fortress shrank into the distance. Chlorvac remained at the council chamber, replaying fragments of their words again and again, as if trying to decode a hidden instruction. You mistake politeness for weakness. We don't need to fight to win. You challenged us. The Emperor finally spoke. Did they issue demands? No, Chlorvac said quietly. Then why do I feel like we've already lost something? Chlorvac didn't answer. Because deep inside, something had cracked open. A long-sealed part of the Empire's memory, scorched by arrogance and rewritten pride, had remembered a terrible truth. Earth wasn't a world of peace. Earth was a world of patience. And when provoked, it didn't roar, it smiled. In the Outer Rim colonies, words spread faster than light. Empire conscripts whispered of the Terran ghosts who walked through death. Station commanders began deleting contingency plans. One admiral tried to activate a retaliatory strike and found the war code scrubbed clean. Another fled her post, convinced her food had been poisoned by a recipe left behind in a digital file labeled "From Earth with Love." But Earth didn't send fleets. It didn't burn cities. It simply waited. And that was worse, because everyone knew what came after waiting. Caleb watched the stars stretch into threads as the shuttle hit cruising speed. "Do you think they'll retaliate?" Mira shrugged. "Their empire. They'll try. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not for a year. But they'll convince themselves that fear can be unlearned. And we'll remind them," he said. "Always." Silence settled in the cabin. Not awkward. Not heavy. Just a shared stillness between two people who had once walked into the center of an empire and rewired it from the inside with nothing but preparation, intelligence, and a smile. The light from distant stars flickered across their faces. Neither of them looked back. In the Empire's heart, a new order had begun to circulate. Quiet, unofficial, shared in encrypted whispers among the highest ranks. Do not engage Terrans. Do not harm Earthlings. If captured, apologize. Somewhere on a moon in the outer territories, a young tactician read that order and laughed. What could one human possibly do? An older officer nearby didn't laugh. He'd seen the footage. He'd watched the eyes of the humans when they spoke, polite, measured, amused. He'd seen them smile. "You don't want to find out," he muttered. Back on Earth, the Strategic Diplomatic Corps welcomed Caleb and Mira without ceremony. No banners. No applause. Just a debrief room with 2 chairs, warm drinks, and a quiet director who listened more than he spoke. After an hour, he finally looked up. "You didn't use any weapons." "No need," Mira said. "You didn't call in the fleet. They never saw it. You didn't threaten." Caleb grinned. "We didn't have to." The director leaned back. "So what did you leave them with?" Mira thought for a moment. Then she answered, "A mirror." And that was the truth of it. The Empire had been shown not who the humans were, but who they were, how they reacted, how quickly they broke when met with patience instead of panic, how a species obsessed with conquest folded under the weight of its own insecurity. The broadcast wasn't just a message. It was a reflection. And the Empire would never forget the day it looked in that mirror and saw its own downfall. No battles, no blood, just 2 humans. And the words, "We are human." Not a boast, not a threat, just a fact. The last thing the Empire heard before their systems collapsed.